Okay, so my name is Terry McGenity. I'm a professor of environmental microbiology at the University of Essex. And the title of our joint presentation is Oysters and Oil Are Hidden Treasures, and it's very misleading because I'm going to be talking about the oil side of things, and I do not think that oil is a hidden treasure. Okay, the real hidden treasures are things like this. This is, think of it about 1,000,000 times smaller. This is called Bifidobacterium longum. You can pass it round if you want. It's a bacterium. It's a bacterium, and that's an example of a bacterium. I'll get onto the C in a minute, but that's an example of a bacterium that lives inside our guts. Yeah, and it's doing really valuable things for us. It's helping us digest our food. Other bacteria affect our mood and have all sorts of influences on us. But we have approximately half the cells in our body are bacterial. So we are effectively walking bacteria, okay, if you think about it. So let's think about the sea. How many bacteria do we have in the ocean? Well, if you think about, let's say, a whale, and think about all the whales in the ocean. And if you multiply that by 1,000, and if you could weigh it, at a railway station perhaps, if you could weigh all those whales, that would be equivalent to the mass of all the bacteria in the sea. And they are hugely, hugely important. Every second breath you take is a consequence of microorganisms in the ocean. Some of them are diatoms with silica shells, some of them are cyanobacteria, and they are producing oxygen, okay, in the same way that plants do on land. So I want to dispel the myth of bacteria as the bad guys. Yeah, we could not live without them. And the example I'm going to give is with regards to oil degradation. Okay, so what I'm actually going to talk about are oil spills. One very specific spill in particular that occurred along this coastline. Some of you may remember it even. And I'm going to talk about beasts. Beasts from the east. Yeah, and the effect that that's having on the coastline here. And exhumations. And finishing at the end about our microbial treasures. So, can I ask you, can any of you name any famous oil spills? Dr. McHugh here, my colleague, will mention hundreds, I'm sure, but does anyone else know any famous oil spills? Yep, shout out.
The Exxon in the southwest.
Exactly, the Exxon Valdez, very famous one. Yeah, that was Alaska, yeah. And then there was the, what was the one in the UK? There was the Amoco Cadiz. Torrey Canyon's the one. That's the one you were thinking of in the southwest of the UK. That's right. We've had lots. There's been also the Deepwater Horizon, which wasn't an oil tanker, but was an oil pipeline, effectively under the sea. Massive spill in the Gulf of Mexico. Thankfully, they're more rare than they used to be. But they keep happening. You know, this is an example of one you can just see here. It's called Wakashio. That's the name of the ship. They're usually named after the ships off the coast of Mauritius in 2020. And I think we all know the damage that they can cause, the smothering of wildlife, but then you've got the long-term effects of that oil. Oops. Press the right button. Okay, and one particular spill is really relevant to this area. It's called the Eleni V. Or it's actually the Eleni 5, Roman numeral V, but everyone calls it the Eleni V. And I've been doing a bit of research on this. I've been reading through all newspapers, the Anglian Times, and I've been reading, looking at, if you Google Anglia ITV News, Eleni V, there's a half-hour show on this whole spill that you can look at on YouTube. and even looking through government reports. And I'll read this actually. I should say that in this government report, it was from the Parliamentary Select Committee, because there was a lot of cock-ups, a whole host of messes associated with this spill that occurred in 1978. And in fact, the words muddle and ineptitude combined with government appear quite a lot. Not in the report, but in the Anglia TV programme. So this is from the Parliamentary Select Committee. The collision early in the afternoon of Saturday the 6th of May 1978 occurred in thick fog near Happisburgh Sands. I hope I pronounced that correctly, I'm not local. I knew that, I was just testing you. Thank you, Haysborough. Off the coast of Norfolk. The Eleni V was hit by a French registered bulk ore carrier, and her forward position was sliced off. Okay, so that's what happened, 1978. And this is 1 month before the tourist season. This was carrying many, many tons of oil. And you can see, this is the back end of the ship. That was fine, and that was towed back to Rotterdam from where it came. And this is the bow, okay? And it created two major problems. One was the fact that it was likely to hit the Bacton, I hope I pronounced that correctly, pipeline. Yeah, the gas pipeline, and that could have caused big issues. The other was that it was leaking tons and tons of heavy fuel oil, very close to the shore. And in fact, this is a picture, this doesn't work too well, but this is a picture. Here we have Bacton up here, and here we have Sizewell at the bottom, and this represents the area that was that was affected by the oil. And lots of things happened in the intervening period, and I don't normally read select committee reports, but this one's quite juicy. There's lots of gossip. Clearly the Department of Trade, as it was then, didn't have the preparedness for oil spills that we have today. And what was happening was the bow, to remove it from the Bacton pipeline up here, it was towed, and there was all sorts of ideas about banking it, putting it on a sandbank, and then pumping the oil out. That was pretty difficult because it was heavy fuel oil, and its pour point, that's the point at which it's a liquid, corresponded roughly with the temperature of the sea at the time. So it didn't spread out like normal crude oil, forming a sheen. It formed thick, biscuit-like plates, and some of them floated and some of them sank. Okay, so it was a major problem, and also they couldn't, because it was so thick and viscous, they couldn't pump it, not without heating the oil, which creates issues itself. So after spill happened on the 6th of May, and on the 30th of May, here's a bit of a spoiler as to what happened. Yeah, it was towed out into the North Sea, away from the coastline, and loads of charges were placed on it, and it was exploded. Okay, to make sure that the oil that came out of it did not reach the shoreline where it could cause most damage. Not saying it didn't cause a lot of damage to the benthos, the sea floor there, but at least it didn't further affect the shoreline. So in that intervening period, approximately 30 takeaway, 24 days, what was going on other than, towing it from place to place? Because oil was leaking all the time. Well, what they decided to do was to treat the oil with dispersants. And that's a common method for ordinary crude oil. And the way it works is kind of shown here. Okay, here's an example of dispersant being sprayed. I should say dispersant is like furry liquid, your washing up liquid. Yeah, you've got your greasy plates, you spread it on, and it dissipates the grease, or the oil in this case. Here we have a little experiment done by Boyd McHugh and my PhD student, Jake Smallbone. It's very simple. Here's oil on top of seawater. To this one, no dispersant was added, and here dispersant was added. Yeah, and the dispersant effectively breaks up this thick layer of oil into lots and lots of small droplets. And those small droplets get attached, or bacteria in the environment attached to those oil droplets. These are specialized oil degrading bacteria, and they start to use the oil, use the hydrocarbons in the oil as a source of food. Another example of a very useful organism for us, and this is a picture of a tiny oil droplet. Here, this is about 1/100th the width of a human hair. Okay, and these are bacteria surrounding the oil droplets. In fact, these are called Alcanivorax borcumensis, or ALCA for short. We like to call them ALCA. And if you want to learn a bit more about this organism, in the Planet Positive tent there, we've got further information, and kids can take away pictures, etc. Another way to think about this is to think of this marquee, and imagine that there's 1,000 and convert it into some fruitcake. Yeah, this is one big giant fruitcake. Imagine 1,000 people outside, all very hungry, trying to eat this fruitcake. It's not going to go down well if people jump on the outside and try and munch away at it. But if we're more civilized and break it up into little pieces and pass it round, then it's going to be consumed much more quickly. Same sort of principle, the oil's being broken up into these tiny droplets and being eaten by bacteria. So, 900 tons of dispersant, 13 ships spraying this in 1978 onto the Elaine V and onto the oil that was being produced. What effect did it have? Absolutely none. Nothing at all. Yeah, it just bounced off this viscous oil because it was a different type of oil. It was fuel oil. It did not work. Okay, so this approach would never be used in the present day. And this is the consequence. Have a look at the pictures that are going around if you can't see this too well. But these are archive footage of workers on North Beach. Yeah, so yeah, North Beach, that way. About 1 mile from here, probably less than that. Does anyone remember the Elaine V spill? And I'm looking at the more grey-haired people in the audience. Yeah, you remember it? And can you remember images like this? Yeah? Good. Yeah, and what was the response? Once it gets to the shore, fortunately, it is fortunate in a way. If these had been the muddy sediments of Essex, this would be really, really damaging. In a sense, the sandy beaches here are less damaged. They're clearly very, very impacted, but you can dig and dump. Yeah? So here we are. This was the solution to basically get in there with shovels and chuck it away. Yeah? Or with a digger here. Massive amounts of oil along the coastline just up the road. Whoops, wrong way. Okay. So that's great, isn't it? You know, got rid of most of it before the holiday season. One problem, how did they get rid of it? They buried it. Thank you, sir. Yeah, sorry, someone else said it as well. So yeah, they did. Some of it was taken away, but a lot of it, trenches were dug at the back of the dunes, and it was chucked in there. Yeah. What's the problem with that, given? Yeah, exactly. I think everyone from this region knows about coastal erosion. Yeah, and this is an example from our colleague, Professor Sue Brooks, who studies coastal erosion along this, especially along this area. This is after the beast from the east. Here's I'm not going to attempt to pronounce, Cove Hive, yeah? Yeah, thank you. And here is a tree that has been uprooted as a consequence of the beast from the east in March 2018. And here's some data from Professor Brooks. And what this basically shows is the wind, this is wave height actually. And during the period of the beast, and quite obviously you can see waves, lots of waves, 4 to 5 meters, tending from an easterly direction. Yeah, hence the beast from the east. So that creates a major problem. And Professor Brooks contacted us. She'd been contacted by members of the public after Storm Darcy. So this is like the second beast from the east, if you like, that occurred in February 2021. And Boyd McHugh and myself went along to inspect what had happened. Because we're interested in microbial degradation of oil, clean-up of oil spills. And this is what you could see. Again, it's better on the handouts there, but this is North Beach, and at least 500, probably 600, 700 meters worth of the coast there. Local people nodding, thank you. Was eroded, releasing lumps of oil. And when the sun was out, the pour point changes. You know, oil, like wax, when it's heated up, it'll become more fluid. And this starts to become fluid, and you can see lumps of it on the beach. And there was a lot of discussion and a lot of outcry locally, I guess, to people who walk along that beach. And in fact, I've got a specimen of a sample that we took. Just bear with me. So we can pass this around. Please don't open the bag. It's gooey and rather unpleasant, but it's, you know, this one's rather solid. It's combined with the sand, and here's a little picture to show you precisely where it came from. It was approximately 400 meters from the car park on North Beach, and it's a picture of Boyd McHugh, who's just there in the audience for scale. So feel free to pass that around. Feel free to squidge it. You can tell that it's oily, and you can smell it as well. You probably can't in the bag, but certainly out in the field you could smell that. So this is effectively the unearthing of 42-year-old oil. Well, the oil's much older than that, in fact, but spilled oil. Okay. So, what's the problem with this? It's just sticky stuff, yeah? And I'm not here to say that, you know, it's a major environmental catastrophe. It is unpleasant, but we need to get a bit of a better understanding of what's going on. So we went out in the field, and colleagues measured what was in there, and it's got lots of so-called PAHs. That's molecules that look like this. This is naphthalene, mothballs, if you like. Yeah, if any of you who used to use mothballs remember the smell, you can pass that around as well. But most of that's gone because it's volatile. It's the bigger compounds, and in fact the more toxic compounds that remain. Okay, they're very sticky, stick to the sediment, and harder to degrade. And we analysed what microbial community was there compared with the sand that hadn't been impacted. And this is just one organism that we found in abundance. And Adrian, my master's student in the audience, is investigating this right now. An organism called Microbial was one that was very high in abundance. And what Adrian has done some laboratory experiments. And what we're trying to do here is understand basically what's the potential for biodegradation as this oil reaches the beach or in situ, okay, inside the sediment. And in this picture here, this is a flask. You can see some examples of his work in Planet Positive Tent. It's a flask about so big, yeah, and this is just the bottom of the flask. Here's a bit of the oil that's going around the room, and you can just make out, shown by the red arrow, a little bit of fluffy stuff, and that's bacteria, potentially fungi, that are growing on that oil particle. And that's just another example of our friends, the bacteria, who are doing us a really good service by degrading the oil. So this is early days, and we'll hopefully be reporting on this in the near future and learning a lot more about what's going on there. So in summary, I'd just like to say that the combination of climate change, coastal erosion and pollution are all major problems, that we need to consider. Coastal erosion is releasing not just oil like this, but also landfill waste, where landfill sites have been constructed near the coast. And we don't get enough credit, the practitioners don't get enough credit for preparedness. When something goes wrong, we're very quick to criticise. But if you think about how important preparedness is in terms of an oil spill, and if you respond quickly and resolve it, or if you prevent a flood like the one in 1953, that's absolutely great work. So I'd just like to give a bit of recognition to those practitioners who work so hard to prevent environmental catastrophes. But I'd also like to give a lot of credit to the unsung heroes, and they are the microbes who do all the work, in this case, in consuming our pollutants. Thank you very much.